A failing comedian meets a woman in a bar. He's nice to her, so she continues to visit, but the mask slips when she shows her anger, and he finds out she is a convicted stalker. This is a true story. The stalking intensifies as he receives endless amounts of emails. Her advances become more frequent and more sexual when an unwanted email is sent back asking for anal, leading to a sexual assault. This is a true story. The stalker finds a way into the home of her victim. He uses police as a threat to rid of her, but this only amplifies the situation. The stalker becomes viciously angry while at a comedy show that ends with her assaulting the partner of the victim. This is a true story. We flash back to an earlier time in the comedian's life when he meets a man who promises to give him what he wants. They take drugs for weeks on end while the man takes advantage of him, eventually resulting in a violent rape. This is a true story.
It's hard to escape those words, even though they only appear once during the whole series. It's rare that a show is so upfront with something like this, as they usually say based on a true story. This may feel like a meaningless distinction, but it actually carries a lot of weight, since based on implies that it's dramatized. This is a true story implies this is exactly how it happened. We don't need to dramatize it because this is already as dramatic as it needs to be. Did you know that films have to use fake phone numbers like the one I just used? In England, if a mobile phone number starts with 077000900, it just won't ring. That's because dumb people will call these numbers and see if they can talk to their favourite fictional characters. Who are you going to call? Not the Ghostbusters, that's for sure, because that call isn't going anywhere. You obviously can't put someone's real number on screen because even if 0.1% of people call, a show as big as Baby Reindeer would create 22,000 calls. Hello?
I'm gonna fucking kill you, you fucking cunt! I can't believe you did those things, you fucker!
I think you've got the wrong number.
Oh, is this not the number ending in 656?
No, it's not. I'm 657. And you won't be able to kill me anyway, bitch! I know karate. I'll kick the shit out of you, you fucking pussy!
The internet is incredibly quick to jump to death threats. If the internet isn't threatening to kill mentally ill
For a
stalkers,
second, I thought it was an ad too. I was like, God, these ads are getting better and better.
then they're threatening to kill bake-off contestants because they got into the final instead of someone else that they liked. But this is something you need to factor in, like the phone numbers thing. You need to account for nutters. If you're going to be showing real people doing bad things, then you need to do a good job at covering up their identity, which Baby Reindeer and Netflix didn't do very well. Internet sleuths left no stone unturned, by which I mean they did a bit of Googling and found the stalker almost immediately, because they have about 3.5 hours of true story to help them out. But here's where the ethical dilemma comes in. Why does it matter if the internet has found her identity? If this is all true and she is a criminal, then why does it matter if she gets a few death threats? Threatening to kill someone is nowhere near as bad as the crimes perpetrated. So what's the big deal?
I mean, again, it's astonishing how people will watch a show that at its core has stalking and harassing and threats, and then they will turn around and do those exact same things. But they moralize it because they're like, this person is bad. This person is bad. I feel like we've gotten to a point where we just need to come out and say, in general, doxing is bad. It doesn't matter who the person is. Because if you start qualifying it, if you start being like, oh yeah, well that person said racist things, it's like, okay, so that means it's okay for them to be doxxed, to be harassed, to have all these terrible things happen to them because they tweeted something racist. Like, is it something where I think like there are situations where your workplace should know about the things you are saying online and, you know, consequences for those things? Sure. But I do think doxing is bad. I do. Doxing gets people killed. And as someone who's had to deal with this stuff, maybe I'm particularly sensitive to it, but I never see a situation where I think you can genuinely moralize it. Because, yeah, where does the line end? Where does the line end? People are just constantly redrawing lines. Yeah, you're not a hero for showing up to someone's work and threatening their livelihood over tweets. Exactly. And that goes for someone who's like, Donald Trump is the greatest president ever, and he's going to save us from, he's going to save us from illegal aliens. And also goes for someone who makes jokes about Donald Trump getting shot in the ear. Doxing also ruins innocent people's lives, i.e. the Keemstar old man incident. I don't know what that is, but you're right. Doxing can ruin innocent people's lives because it's not every single time that people have the right person. And so if we continue down this path of just, oh yeah, dox away, it's like the death penalty, you know? One of the reasons, and one of the strongest reasons against the death penalty, is that innocent people are killed under the death penalty. They are put to death even though they were innocent. And so, you know, it's a strong argument to say we should never do the death penalty, even if it's only one person, one innocent person, because that is still one innocent person who is being put to death. Not getting into all the other reasons on, you know, being against the death penalty, but that is one that is a particularly strong argument. Keemstar doxed an old RuneScape streamer as a pedo when he was a different guy. Yeah, and here's the thing. It doesn't matter if you retract it. Once it's out there, it's out there. Keemstar called him a pedo when none of that was true. He just happened to resemble someone on a sex offender list. He was just a wholesome old man that liked to play RuneScape. Keemstar continues to be such an evil piece of shit, man. And then he unfortunately passed a few years back. He was just an old guy who liked to play RuneScape. I'm devastated. No. This is the worst news I could have heard. Oh, man. Oh my God. I had this argument with a friend the other day. He was like, pedos should get the death penalty, no questions asked. And I was like, if even one innocent person dies, then it's a moral failure of humanity. Yeah. And it's like with, it's like with doxing, where I'm against doxing in general, but because of how doxing has gotten so out of control that innocent people get caught in the crosshairs. Like, do you guys... Even when the intentions are good, it's still bad. So there was this woman whose name is Chaya Raichik, just like Libs of TikTok. And when people first found out that Libs of TikTok, the real name of Libs of TikTok was Chaya Raichik, and Chaya Raichik is a horrible, horrible person. Horrible person. But what happened was people who are well-intentioned, who hate Chaya Raichik because she's a demon, went after this other Chaya Raichik, who turned out to also live in Brooklyn and work in real estate. Like, there were similarities between the two of them. Had to delete her social media, had to go into hiding. Her family was getting harassed. Yeah, this happens all the time. And so it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have good intentions. It doesn't matter if the person who you think you're going after is an immoral human being, is a bad human being. It's still something that we should not be doing. If it makes you feel better, Ethan Klein worked hard to restore his reputation. Despite that setback, he did recover from those allegations. That does make me feel better. I guess that's an Ethan Klein dub there. Can I give a bad take? Sure. Is it about doxing or... I love at least that you're saying this is a bad take. Remember when people on TikTok harassed the parents of the guy who killed his girlfriend a couple years ago? Yeah, it's just out of control. Internet harassing and doxing is so out of control. And it kind of feels like it's too late to put it back in the bag. I just don't know if Was the Olympic pedo doxxed? I don't know what happened with the Olympic pedo. As far as his information, I mean, he was literally convicted, so people knew who he was, knew what his name was, knew what his, where he came from. Like, it was public information. I don't understand why so many people on the internet are so quick to dox people. Like, surely that can't be psychologically normal, right? So it's part of the mob mentality. And back in the day before we had the internet, we had mobs, like real mobs of people, like human beings. And the concept is the same. It's just that now these are mobs online. And because people have gotten praised, because doxing and harassing people who are deemed to be pieces of shit who deserve to have that happen, like internet do your thing type of thing, all that praise turned it into this monster. And so now it's just willy-nilly doxing and harassing. And it's to the point that a lot of innocent people get caught in the crosshairs. They have to deal with shit if, God forbid, you have the same name, if you look similar, if, somebody mistakes you for this person, posts a photo of you, and then, nobody bothers to fact check. Anyway. Everyone wants to be the star of the Don't Fuck with Cats. Yeah, and then like armchair detectives being a big thing. There is literally a genre of content of people who, pretend to be detectives solving true crime, giving their theories. And there is so much irresponsibility that is taking place with people who call themselves armchair detectives and cover true crime, because there's a lot that happens in a true crime case that care and caution needs to be exacted. Because if you are somebody who just, happened to like get caught up in something, but you had nothing to do with it, blah, 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 blah. And now suddenly there's this YouTuber who's like, I think they're guilty. And this YouTuber has 10 million followers and is like, this person is very suspicious. And I think that they need to be getting asked, blah, blah. Even when that person had been cleared already, like by actual detectives and not a YouTuber applying her makeup or, just sitting there and giving her 2 cents on things. And the thing is that as a content creator, you have a responsibility over your audience. Even though I can't stop you guys, like there's no way for me to like physically stop you from doing what you're going to do. I still have a responsibility to A, not encourage that type of stuff, and B, like not encourage it. Wait, does that make sense? Not encourage it, but also like not say, like I can't not just not say anything. So I always try to do the most, where I'm like, do not harass this person, do not blah blah blah, do not fight battles on my behalf, mostly because it's a waste of your time on Twitter. But it's also like people will choose to not say those things, and they know perfectly well that their audience can go forth and potentially cause problems. I eat waffles. Thank you for the gifted sub. Anyway, I get that people can feel helpless because they understandably have no faith in the criminal justice system. Yeah, and I think going back to Baby Reindeer, if you watch Baby Reindeer, you feel emotional, and you like care for Richard Gadd as he's presented in the show as Donnie. Like, you are on his side. And it's a very it's a very emotional show. The subject material, like the various subject material. And so let's say then you find out who this woman is and that she's just, walking around, and you've just seen this entire show where you're in the mind of the guy who was harassed and, as the show depicts, sexually assaulted by this person. You think to yourself, fuck this person, I'm going to make their life hell because they made this guy's life hell. And so I don't think that everybody who does this kind of thing is bad intentioned. But I think the actions that are taken are often very bad.
He said sarcastically, setting up the next segment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to leave dozens of death threats since I don't really have much going on at the moment.
My phone number very recently got leaked, and I've had hundreds of death threats from people who are insane enough to send death threats to someone they don't know, nor have they bothered to do any research on. I'm of course alluding to the rapist in episode 4 of Baby Reindeer, who the internet sleuths were pretty sure they had solved their identity. Well, they were fucking wrong, and now an innocent man is accused of being a rapist. The sleuths have created a criminal in the minds of hundreds or thousands of people, which isn't something that can be...
If you haven't seen the show, this is a different character. There's a different character in the show. A guy who works in comedy who Richard Gadd's character, Donnie, is told, like, will help him with his not flourishing comedy career. And he repeatedly sexually assaults Donnie. And it's really hard to watch. And the consequences of that are really, really hard to watch as well. But it's something that I think is really important. Subject material being shown on TV. Like, I think male rape is something that is just not frequently explored subject material, and I thought it was something that I thought it was really important. However, it has led to unintended consequences like this.
Very easily. Even though the truth came out to clear this person's name, there's still going to be a large majority that didn't get this update, meaning that person is still a rapist in their mind. I didn't do it!
Let's think about this being a true story. What makes something true as opposed to a lie, or at best a slight bending of the truth? Let's pretend I have threatened to kill you, but in a slightly sarcastic tone, with the intent of it not being taken seriously, like this. I am going to kill you. Now, in the retelling of the story, we portray it like this. I am going to kill you. It's the same story, but with the tiniest of alterations, it completely changes the vibe. So can it be considered true? Have you ever heard someone complaining about road rage directed at them? It's always framed as out of nowhere. They didn't deserve to have someone shouting at them, flipping them off. Then you get in the car and immediately they cut up a lorry so they can brake check them. So you grab hold of that handle that's only there to calm people down as they approach their inevitable death. People like that are awful drivers, and yet they will always believe they're in the right. They believe their version of the truth, but there's always two sides to a story. I'm not saying that the creator of Baby Reindeer is lying about what happened, but in an interview he says that it's all emotionally 100% true. All of the events that take place in the show happened in real life, but it's set up in a way that works for a TV show. It's made to flow in a way that is different to reality. It's based on events of a true story, so you could comfortably say it's dramatised. Now that could equally mean things have been exaggerated, or what would whip up more of a frenzy is the idea that it's been toned down to make it more acceptable for TV, and making the stalker's behaviour more extreme in the minds of people who believe this. This is a true story. Dramatised or not, it doesn't really matter. If the show decides...
Also, it's much more rare that real stories are toned down for film and television, because it's just usually the case that there are flourishes that are made, you know, elements that are dramatized to create a more compelling narrative. One example that I can point to is the Iron Claw. The story of the Von Erich family is so tragic, is too tragic, that Sean Durkin, who directed the Iron Claw, took out certain parts of the story, which were like additional family members' deaths, because it was too much. And what he was left with was like enough to tell this story of the Iron Claw. But that is a rare example where the Von Erich family, who are truly a family cursed with unimaginable tragedy, there's no shortage of dramatic, tragic events, so that when their story is brought to life on screen, there's plenty of material to pull from. But usually it's not the case that a filmmaker is like, this is too much, so I'm going to take some of this stuff out. Mumblecat, thank you for the 15 months. Did Will watch it? He did watch it. Yeah, he really liked it. Didn't they cut out an entire brother? An entire brother who also died. But yeah, normally it's the situation that things are embellished. Events and, real life stories are embellished for dramatic purposes.
But to say based on instead of just this is a true story, then it would have been more apt, but would also help cover them should the real life stalker decide to pursue legal action. She's a lawyer, so that was obviously going to happen. That's the main reason they should have gone with based on, though it might have also prevented some of the threatening nutters. But there will still be other crazies to send death threats, which kind of goes against the point of the show. We have someone trying to deal with being the victim of something horrendous, but it's all brushed aside because the public wanted to create more victims of something else that sucks. This is what Baby Reindeer will be known for now, and the fact that's all I've really spoken about in this video just supports that. The touching story with the heartbreakingly gritty moments
that is
are all overshadowed by this drama. In January 2023, there was a story that was inescapable. Turn on your telly and it was there. Go to YouTube, it was here too. People were talking about it everywhere. The story was the disappearance of Nicola Bulley, and it seemed as though everyone in the UK was involved in the investigation. But what struck me was the speculation, the conspiracy theories, the internet sleuths leaving no stone unturned. What hit me most was the amount of people blaming the partner for the disappearance. Records of accounts were being looked into as a motive, arguments on home security cameras were being scrutinised, and the state of the partner's beard was even questioned. People were genuinely blaming the grieving partner of murder because his beard was well groomed. The logic being someone so stressed out wouldn't take the time to make themselves look presentable. It's obviously not a coping mechanism to make you feel normal, because everyone knows grieving people are supposed to look like a wreck. Case closed, it was him. The conspiracy started to overshadow the story of a woman who slipped into a river and drowned. The life of a woman was set aside so people could create this fantasy of watching a true crime documentary unfold. The victims of a real-life tragedy became characters in a story that needed to be solved. The lines between real life and fiction have been blurred. Real events have become spectacles that you tune into every day to watch the new episodes. But then they always have been. The only difference now is we can interact with them.
If there's a crime that needs solving, the general public can step in to solve it. Problem is, the general public are pretty stupid, so we get waves of misinformation that leads to pointing fingers at innocent people. Then when everyone starts repeating the same lies over and over, it becomes hard not to believe it yourself.
How do we stop it? I don't think you can, at least not anymore. They could have taken more steps to prevent it, like cast someone who doesn't very closely resemble the real life person with the same regional accent, give them a different profession like a judge, making it slightly harder to Google her, and don't show the real life emails and display the unique ways someone types that can easily identify them. But there's only so much you can do, especially in a story like this with so much public information. We all live incredibly public lives nowadays, so most likely the identities will come out. You would need to change a ton of characters' details to protect their identity, making the story cease to be true. Okay, what if you just named those involved? Well, then you are kind of encouraging the public to interact with them, which in the case of the rapist, fuck them, although I don't really think that's how justice should be done. But the stalker who is mentally ill, you don't want to encourage the public to interact with them, since the public suck, while being very predictably one note. Sending death threats? Haven't heard that one before. It's a real rock and a hard place situation, but you can't get rid of the fact it's a true story. Those few words have such a large impact on the narrative because as crazy and far-fetched the story sounds, it is always grounded in reality. It shows to people these horrible things that happen in the world, these horrific things that we can help to change, to help avoid. It allows victims to share their stories and remove their shame.
Yeah, so this is what I was saying where I'm like, I am not somebody who doesn't want these stories being told, doesn't want this, doesn't want this subject material brought to life. But I think this is just a very complicated area of storytelling. You know, it's tough because it is true that, like, had he not fictionalize anything, had he just, this is Fiona Harvey, this is everything that happened, you know, it wouldn't have changed. It wouldn't have changed the death threats. It wouldn't have changed the harassment. I do think that you need to try and go above and beyond when it comes to obscuring the identity. So there's nothing that really can be pointed back to you and go, you could have done more there. And I think the similarities between Martha and Fiona, and I don't mean like similarities in the emotional trauma that they caused to Richard Gadd, but similarities in attributes that could have been changed, that did not need to be a part of Baby Reindeer in order to be effective, in order to get the point across. Like that they definitely dropped the ball on.
It allows others with similar experiences to remove their shame too, while also knowing that they are not alone. It shows the complexities of people and that these complexities are real. All of that because it started with,
"This is a true story."
This is Baby Reindeer's legacy. I wanted to end on a positive note about how telling this story is a way of bringing people who have suffered together, a way of educating us about complicated human behaviour, make us feel sympathy for people who suffer. But the show's message has been completely eclipsed. The real-life Martha did an interview with Piers Morgan, which has already amassed millions of views and spawned a bunch of conspiratorial internet sleuthing videos analysing this hour-long interrogation, combing it for inconsistencies and lies. The view count for Baby Reindeer has tripled since I started recording this video, all because of the media whipping up a frenzy. All of those new viewers flooded in because of the drama, because of the speculations, and so they are watching the show with a different frame of mind. They're watching to get a better understanding of the drama, for a better understanding of who Martha is, so they can come up with their own armchair psychology theories. I think this woman really is batshit crazy. Lock her away in Arkham Asylum. How do we stop it? You can't, because this is the system. If you tell a story that gains this much interest, then people will start digging for answers. When people start digging, it attracts the media, who come along to simply point it out. Hey everyone, look here! These people might have found some gold. The news stories then legitimise the situation, which creates the gold rush that everyone wants in on. More and more people begin digging away for answers as to who Martha is, and all the media does is point at them while handing more shovels to the public. Come along now, into the hole you go, and the cycle continues. People like Piers Morgan know exactly what they're doing. After all, this is the man who was editor of the Daily Mail during the phone hacking scandals. I watched some of the interview with the real-life Martha, but I had to turn it off, as it really grossed me out. The questions were so...
I refused to watch that interview. I did not watch it on stream. I talked about it, but I did not watch it on stream because I was like, no. This also grosses me out. This is exploitative, and I don't need to watch this. I don't need to legitimize this, which I disagree with.
So incredibly leading and designed to stir up more questions from the public. He acts as though he's on her side, so she can't see how grotesquely he's exploiting her. Exploiting a vulnerable woman who likely needs help. The news isn't about reporting things that people need to know. It's about gossip you'll talk to your friends about to find out their dumb theories. It's about creating a narrative to draw in as many people as possible for as long as possible. They pick at the story like hungry vultures, getting all the juicy bits of gossip until all that's left is scraps on the bone. Only when everyone stops giving a shit will the story get thrown away along with all those exploited. We saw it with the Nicola Bully story, we've seen it with Baby Reindeer, and we'll definitely see it again in the future. All because we can't help ourselves when this is a true fucking story.
That was a great video, and I was reading in the comments that the guy who made this video, I'll link it. The guy who made this video, when he put it out, he had like 1,000 YouTube subscribers, and someone was like, how do you only have 1,000 YouTube subscribers? This is a very well-made video. Now he has 19.5 thousand subscribers, which is great. That's good. Yeah, that's the thing about YouTube is sometimes I will watch amazing videos, production quality, messaging, and it'll be someone with a very low number of YouTube subscribers because, I don't know, the fucking algorithm. All right, so we'll cover this and then that'll probably be it. Hold on. I'm gonna close Will's door. I can hear everything. Yeah, it's about football. Football. Okay. Fact and fiction have spilled over into real-life courtrooms before. A number of high-profile lawsuits aimed at TV dramas inspired by real people have played out in recent years. In 2019, the late Olivia de Havilland tried and failed to get the Supreme Court to review her dismissed case against the makers of FX Feud, Betty and Joan. A few years later, Netflix settled a defamation case brought by chess champion Nona Gaprindashvili over a line in an episode of The Queen's Gambit. Netflix also recently settled a lawsuit filed by the estate of Griselda Blanco over the series Griselda, starring Sofia Vergara as the infamous female drug lord, claiming that the family didn't authorize Netflix to use their image, likeness, and/or identity. Several other cases are ongoing, among them a lawsuit from former VF staffer Rachel Deloche Williams that targets Inventing Anna, Shonda Rhimes' Netflix limited series about art world scammer Anna Delvey. Williams' defamation case claims that Netflix made a deliberate decision for dramatic purposes to portray her as a greedy, snobbish, disloyal, dishonest, cowardly, manipulative, and opportunistic person. Then there's the lawsuit brought by former New York City prosecutor Linda Fairstein over the way she was portrayed in When They See Us, Ava DuVernay's Netflix limited series about the Central Park 5 case, which led to Fairstein getting dropped by her book publisher and resigning from several boards. I did not know that. According to the Southern District of New York judge who allowed the lawsuit to proceed, there is evidence that by opting to portray Fairstein as the series villain who is intended to embody the perceived injustices of a broader system, defendants reverse-engineered plot points to attribute actions, responsibilities, and viewpoints to Fairstein that were not hers and are unsupported in defendant's substantial body of research materials. These legal and ethical scuffles extend to movies, too. Just last week, a lawyer for Donald Trump accused the filmmakers behind forthcoming Trump biopic The Apprentice, that's gonna be fun, written by Vanity Fair's Gabriel Sherman, of defamation and election interference, is issuing a cease and desist letter. My God. They can't move on. Election interference always is on their mind. It's always with everything. The producers released a statement in response. The film is a fair and balanced portrait of the former president. We want everyone to see it and then decide. I will say, I feel like when it comes to Donald Trump, there's no way that you can portray Donald Trump worse on screen than Donald Trump is in real life. Like, he's just a guy that he's so publicly bad. You can't make him worse. The deluge of true crime scripted series and dramatizations of recent historical events suggest that viewers crave the unexpected twists and raw authenticity of real stories. But they also expect a smooth narrative. When I spoke to When They See Us writer Michael Starbury back in 2019, he talked about trying to stay true to the spirit of Corey Wise's story in the final episode, while ensuring that it was digestible for a mass audience. You don't have a lot of time, and you have to make choices on how much time you want to see someone suffering in prison. So you do compress the time and consolidate characters. Those are things that happen naturally in a narrative versus a documentary. It's a delicate balancing act for the writers trying to wrangle unruly human experience into a svelte storyline that holds the viewer's attention. Hollywood executives want a heightened sense of drama, the OMG crazy version of the story, and a clear progression of events, says the showrunner of a successful true crime series. Most of the time, our lives are not structured like a screenplay, and sometimes there's stuff that's internal. Yeah, that's a big problem, is like, things that happen in real life, a lot of times are internalized, but you have to externalize that for film and television. It's a medium that shows you. It's effective storytelling shows you. And so it is a tricky thing to do when you have to externalize things that are internalized. And that's where, that is where like dramatization and the fictionalizing comes in. But TV execs demand big external events, the showrunner says, even if reality didn't actually unfold that way. In a classic fictional mystery story, there are red herrings, and alternative suspects. In real life, there's only one person who committed the murder. And if you suggest that other people might have been involved or done it and you cannot back that up, you are defaming them. Sometimes executives might push for a clear villain, but the showrunner says it can be really tricky because people often don't do things for a single motive. Baby Reindeer is a particularly fascinating case, a first-person account of a sexual assault survivor struggling with a stalker. Do we really want to create an environment in which a creator cannot dramatize this complex, traumatic experience? I personally wouldn't be comfortable with a world in which we decided it was better that Richard was silenced and not allowed to tell the story, says Netflix UK policy chief Benjamin King. It's a morass because there are no easy answers, the showrunner says. Viewers understand on a certain level that these things are fictionalized, but they will still assume that the story bears some relationship to the facts. So if you wander too far off the garden path, you are potentially ruining somebody's life. There's a huge problem with shows being based on podcasts or articles. Pamela Anderson didn't want Pam and Tommy made, but it's not based on her lives. It's an adaptation of her life. Yeah. Ultimately, people don't have a say if a show or film is created that features them and things that happen to them. Studios are legally responsible for the shows they create, and they have guards in place to keep reality-inspired dramas on solid ground. Davi Waller, creator of FX's historical limited series Mrs. America, I believe that is the show about Phyllis Schlafly, says that she did enormous amounts of research and kept backup for every detail the writers included about real-life figures. Once the network approved the scripts and before the show went into production, she says, a group of lawyers were combing through the scripts and then we had to annotate them, explaining where did we get this from? Where did we get that from? They were very, very thorough. Another way that studios try to insulate themselves from legal backlash is by purchasing the life rights from the real people behind fictionalized characters. But it turns out that the term life rights is misleading. People don't really own their life story. Producers can and do use material that's in the public record. So the life rights contract is an agreement not to sue the studio for defamation if you don't like the end product, a way of buying their support or silence. A life rights contract could also dissuade other studios from buying competing projects based on the same story. Is the real person being fictionalized a public figure or an ordinary private person like Harvey? That also makes a difference, at least in terms of the legal ramifications. If it's a public figure who's suing because of something that's been said about them or the way that they've been portrayed, then that public figure has to show clear and convincing evidence that the defendants, the writer, the network, whoever, made false statements about them, knowing they were false or being reckless as to their falsity. So this is what I was talking about before, where it's very hard to prove this because usually you're just drawing inferences as there's nothing really definitive. Like you're not going to find an email saying, oh yeah, we're going to show this person as a pedophile, even though we know they're not a pedophile, but we're purposely choosing them to show them as a pedophile and we're lying. Although he's not involved in the baby reindeer case, Rufus Isaacs sighs when I ask him about it. The question I ask creatives is this: don't you feel some responsibility to the person you're talking about? If you're not going to be entirely accurate and you're going to be nasty about them, don't you have a duty to disguise them and protect them? They changed Harvey's name, but Rufus Isaacs believes they kept too many identifying biographical details. Instead of having fictional Martha work in law the way that the real Fiona Harvey does, he said, make her couturier or something. Couturier or something. This God, that is giving rural juror. This echoes comments from Laura Ray, a woman who's accused Harvey of stalking her in real life. Harvey has also denied these allegations. It was obvious to me and to a lot of other people that she, Martha, was my stalker. They made her a lawyer. That detail didn't have any bearing on the story. They could have made her a doctor or an accountant. And she noted that Gunning, the actress who plays Martha, even sounds like her. I mean, she had the same laugh, even the same slightly kind of funny waddling walk. That is a woman who says that she was also stalked by Fiona Harvey, who is agreeing with the fact that not enough changes were made to disguise the character, or to disguise the real identity of Martha. For his part, Gad told VF earlier this year that the stage version of Baby Reindeer got a lot of attention and he didn't hear anything from Harvey at the time. And I think in the Netflix show as well, we've gone to lengths to disguise a lot of aspects of all of the real life people in the show. So I suppose we've covered ourselves as much as we possibly can. Rufus Isaacs agrees that creators should have the leeway to play around with real characters with a simple caveat. If they make somebody less likable, I think that they have a duty to disguise that person by absolutely changing their name and important biographical details about them. If they do that, then they're free to do what they want. Otherwise, he says, the effect is that people watch a series that they understand is based on real life. Therefore, they judge the person in question not on who they actually are, but as to how they're portrayed in the series. And for people who are portrayed unflatteringly, then their reputation becomes completely soiled. You're really harming them. Yeah, because the truth is that there's one person who gets to tell their side of the story. And again, it's not to say that Martha did not cause all of this distress to Richard Gadd, that, like, not to say she didn't harass him, that she didn't stalk him, that she didn't do these things that, had a really harmful effect on him. But he is the one in this situation who gets to tell his side of the story. He gets to present her and the facts of what happened through his eyes. And that's how it goes, right? Like, there are always two sides of the story. And I think people confuse that with, oh, there being two sides of the story being you can't say that one person is telling the truth and one person is not telling the truth. But I think it's instead remembering that, like, with two sides to a story, you are only getting one perspective. And so naturally you are going to be inclined to believe and feel whatever the person who's presenting their side of the story is presenting. Yeah. And, things that happen in real life that are then fictionalized for the screen, there are assumedly liberties that are being taken to make someone seem worse than they are, when the point is that they are the villain of the story. And with the case of Fiona Harvey, we know that to be true because Martha in Baby Reindeer was shown to like horribly sexually assault Donnie, who is Richard Gadd, as well as this big moment at the end of the show where she is convicted of stalking. And it's presented in a way where, like, you're supposed to, you as the viewer, feel sorry for Martha, and you see how, like, there's an attempt to humanize her, and and the character of Donnie also comes to that realization where he does feel sorry for her, and she is somebody who is not mentally well. And there is so there is that at the end of the show, but still, those are big things that happened in the show that Richard Gadd has now said were fictionalized. And that's where it gets complicated, because he's the one who's telling the story here. So he especially bears responsibility to, to the person who he is presenting as the villain in this story for things that they did to him. Is there an example of based on a true story of a show or a movie that did this in a good way? Let me think about that. I mean, there definitely are. I think people might want to say Fargo, but I would actually disagree with that. I think Fargo is a great film, but Fargo is an absolute stretch to say based on a true story. Chernobyl. I thought Chernobyl was really, really good. Yeah. Fargo is not a true story. Let me think about things that I've watched recently based on a true story. Oh, I watched like She Said. Stuff like She Said, Spotlight. Let me think of. Okay, wait. I want to think of examples similar to Baby Reindeer, where the characters are fictional in the sense that they have different names. They are not the real life people. It's a story that is purporting to be a real story, but the characters themselves are not the people in real life. Succession? Yeah, but Succession doesn't say based on a true story. Maybe Gone Girl? No, Gone Girl is not based on a true story. Zero Dark 30, I think, did that. I've actually never seen Zero Dark 30. Hold on, I might need to. I can't think of anything right now. What other Baby Reindeer? If Succession said it's based on the Murdochs, they'd be in trouble. Yeah, if they said based on this is a true story. Okay, so there was isn't I May Destroy You? Yeah, I May Destroy You is a semi-autobiographical drama series that deals with similar themes. Okay, I May Destroy You was excellent. And I think that that's probably a similar example where it was based on real trauma that happened to the creator of the show, Michaela Cole. Hillbilly Elegy. Oh my god. Wasn't Fleabag also originally a stage act? Like, isn't Fleabag... I can't remember if Phoebe Waller-Bridge says that Fleabag is semi-autobiographical. I mean, I'm assuming so because she did it as a one-woman show. So, yeah. I look, I guess I would say, I guess I would stick with I May Destroy You as a really good example to hold up. Does Band of Brothers count? Band of Brothers is based on historian Stephen Ambrose's nonfiction book of the same name. I don't know if that's like series includes minor, but here's the thing. The difference with like Band of Brothers and Baby Reindeer is Band of Brothers is based on the story of an army regiment during World War II. So there's not as much responsibility as you have with something like Baby Reindeer, where one, Fiona Harvey is a person who is like still alive, and two, she is the villain in Baby Reindeer that deals with like very heavy subject material such as stalking and sexual assault. Yeah. Are we portraying the Nazis fairly? And the soldier who wrote the book, was involved in Band of Brothers. Yeah. So there was like collaboration there because it was an adaptation of this book. Now, people keep mentioning May December. So May December is a fictional story. May December never ever said that it was based on a true story. May December, which was written and directed by Todd Haynes. Now, it's very clear that it is inspired by the story of Mary Kay Letourneau and Vili Fulau. Like the similarities of that real life case and May December are very apparent. But there is a big difference still in that Todd Haynes has never claimed that May December is anything but a work of fiction. But it was one of those, it was with May December, the situation there was getting into kind of the conversation around fictional stories that pull inspiration from real life, which, can have the unintended consequences of re-traumatizing the people who are clearly, whose story clearly inspired the film. And so Vili Fulau came out and said as much, like he was upset that he hadn't been included with it. Now, I don't think that should be a standard. I don't think it's good for filmmaking to have to include the person who, the people whose story you are drawing inspiration from for whatever, film or TV show you're making. I don't think that's something that like filmmakers should be required to do. But I also think Vili Fulau was entitled to feel how he felt about May December, because that is a man who as a boy was preyed upon by by his adult teacher, who he then had he had a kid when he was in 7th grade. They were together for a very long time. They divorced. She got cancer and died. But like he was very clearly traumatized from that situation, and so talked about how seeing his story being brought to life, albeit fictionalized, in May December was something that was traumatizing for him. And that's where like, yeah, it gets kind of, it gets kind of complicated there. But I also don't think that Todd Haynes had a moral responsibility to consult and have Vili Fulau as a producer on the project. It was also a public news story. There were already figures, which is different than Baby Reindeer, which you wouldn't know of otherwise. Yeah, so I think we brought up that point earlier, where again, we're talking about public information that is part of the public record. And that's why for public figures, it's harder to, there's less of a burden there. And it's also harder to prove defamation versus private individuals, private citizens. Trumo, thank you for the 8 months. Charlize Theron's Monster, there was some criticism that she portrayed the serial killer as a victim and the victims as villains. Yeah, look, there's always going to be criticism around something that is either, based on true events, either is like a real story brought to life for screen where none of the character, or none of the people's names are changed. Like it is as it happened in real life. And then also when something is based on a true story, fictionalized for screen, in that characters' names are changed, other details are changed. There is always going to be criticism around these, and as we've moved so deeply into the true crime genre, where I will say a lot of true crime is not produced responsibly, whether we're talking podcasts, whether we're talking YouTube channels, whether we're talking documentaries or film and television shows. A lot of true crime is not produced responsibly. It is exploitative. It gives me the ick. And there just keeps being more and more and more true crime that's produced because it's so goddamn popular. Remember the Amityville fiasco back in the 70s? Yeah. American Sniper made a scumbag into a hero. Yeah, I will never forgive Bradley Cooper. I'll never forgive Bradley Cooper. Who fucking directed that? Clint Eastwood. Yo, I'll also never forgive the Oscars. Bradley Cooper, Clint Eastwood, the Oscars. Shame. Shame. Anyway, I hate true crime so much that I generally will not date someone who watches it. Look, I am someone who consumes true crime from time to time. Like I just watched The Jinx. I just watched The Jinx for the first time. And yet it is something where, as a consumer of true crime, I am constantly assessing my personal responsibility as a consumer of true crime. And I no longer watch anything, consume anything that I think is exploitative and irresponsible. Like that's part of me trying to be a responsible consumer of true crime. And I think that I don't think saying like true crime in general is like it's all bad. I don't think that's true. But I also think it's something where a lot of sensitivity has to be had and personal responsibility, and a lot of people don't do that. What do you think are good markers to know if something is exploitative if you aren't sure? So what I would say is YouTubers who don't have a purpose to doing true crime content other than it being like salacious, other than it being something that they can make a lot of money on, but they're not doing anything to give back. So for instance, Crime Junkie has had problems. Mostly from like stealing journalist content. But Crime Junkie does a good job of covering stories that are not commonly covered because they're not white blonde women who have been murdered. Beautiful white woman murdered by a vicious serial killer. Like, they cover a lot of stories of indigenous women, of black women, of and not just women, but men as well. Stories that I've never heard before. And they will have a call to action. So they cover stories that are, ones that are recent, and will say, if you have information, like, this is what you should, please call, blah, blah, blah. And in many of their episodes, like, they have spoken with the victims' family members. So they're, like, clearly working with them and helping them to get the story out. Because for a lot of people whose family members have disappeared, whose family members have been murdered, the media does not care. The media is not going to cover those stories. So there is good that some true crime producers or some true crime creators do in shining a light on those stories. Trumo, thank you so much for the bits. I would also say, like, certain YouTubers, yes, who ignore victims' family members who ask for their videos to be taken down. Certain YouTubers who, I think also the way that they cover true crime, where it's like they're telling a spooky story, where they're trying to make it, they're trying to, like, make it as salacious as possible, as in, like, they're telling a good story. That gives me the ick. Like, like, fantasize shit. And I think, like, when they get too into doing the armchair detective thing, I don't like that. It's gross. There also needs to be a thoroughness and respect for the materials, experiences, and lives being shared. Absolutely. There also needs to be respect for the journalists whose work you are taking. You can't just take an article, read that article like it's your own work. I think there's a lot of true crime content creators who are lazy as fuck, who don't do actual research, and who will literally just steal a journalist's work and pass it off as their own. Yes, they sensationalize real life stories and people's actual experiences and deliver them in a way like it's giving gossip or telling a scary story. Yes, you can tell who is doing true crime with the understanding that these are real people, and with true crime stories that, that, like, their like, let's say it happened in 2017. Their family members are still alive. They're around. This is not like a 200-year-old case where you don't have to worry as much about, not saying that you shouldn't give care, because those are human beings, but a lot of true crime is being produced without a care to the fact that the families are alive and they are seeing these things. I watch true crime sometimes on YouTube, and I'm so fucking sick of all the comments on the videos that won't shut up about how pretty or skinny or whatever the person making that video is. Like, people died who were seriously hurt, and you're talking about how pretty the person speaking is. That is one of my biggest pet peeves with true crime. I actually talked to my mom about this because she hates this as well, and she was in the New York Times comments on some story that was covering the death of a woman and described her as a beautiful young woman, and my mom was in the comments being like, I'm so sick and tired of this. Why is it that they always have to stress that she was a beautiful young woman taken in her prime? It's disturbing. Yes. It's gross. Classic comment queen. Yep. My mom is out here in the New York Times comments. There are a lot of true crime channels that will just publicly upload publicly available interview tapes. Yeah, I will say I think when true crime really exploded, especially with podcasts around 2015, 2016, there has been a lot of pushback. I do think true crime podcasters and YouTubers have taken more care to not sensationalize true crime. There are still ones who are very guilty of it. But like being better at what is your purpose for doing this other than entertainment? Because this shouldn't just be this shouldn't be entertainment. And that's why I do appreciate with Crime Junkie, with podcasts like Crime Junkie, where they are donating to women's shelters, where they are like actively working to get these people's stories out there because somebody might have information, and because the media won't cover it, because these are not, the typical stories that they like to cover. And so there's like real tangible actions that they are doing there. And then I think I think true crime content creators who are not explaining things. So for instance, they're covering a story where, the cops dropped the ball, blah, blah, blah. I think it's important, if you do true crime, to talk about how often that happens, to talk about like why so often police departments fail in solving these crimes. It's important to say ACAB. But, just like giving some context giving context that's really important within the true crime genre. And like also talk about like, why don't Indigenous women get any coverage? There are so many missing Indigenous women who do not get the time of day. Why is that? Anyway, there's a long-winded answer to your question of how do I know like what kind of true crime to ignore. Yeah, I will say largely for me, the putting on makeup while telling a story like it's just a story and not horrific real life events that happen, that's always kind of given me the ick. I'm not saying that there's not content creators out there who maybe are not as bad as I think they are, but that is like so weird to me still. Me like putting on your makeup while telling a story of horrific brutality, it's just always been strange. Thank you, I understand a bit better now. Okay, that's good.